Hi, folks. So tonight you are going to be learning about fossils. As we previously discussed, index fossils are fossils that are of organisms that were alive during a certain period of time that surrounded the Earth. And using those fossils, you're able to date the rock or find the age of the rock or the relative age of the rock just by knowing when that fossil had been around. But I do need to talk to you about what a fossil is and how a fossil is made in order for you to really understand how an index fossil would work as well. So here we go. What is a fossil? A fossil is any type of organism that has been preserved. So it's a remains of a once living organism that has been preserved either in rock or tar or amber, whatever, what have you, and we'll get to those things in just a moment. Why do we need those fossils? What is it that they're going to tell us? They give us clues about organisms that lived long ago and help show that evolution has occurred, or give theoretical evidence that evolution has occurred, provide evidence that the Earth's surface has changed over time. So it's really showing you that if this organism had been buried long ago and then uncovered by numerous layers of rock to the point where it became rock itself, and then has been since uncovered, then evidently the Earth's surface is also changing. And also gives scientists a little bit of understanding of what the past environments may have been like. So some organisms that lived a while ago were able to live in a different environment than the one that we have now. So meaning different types of flora, different types of atmospheric combinations, so different gases and things like that. So a fossil is formed only by being covered quickly by some type of material or sediment. So for this, we're going to look at just sediment. So an animal or an organism that dies or drops to the ground or something like that has to be buried quickly by sediment such as ash, silt, sand, dirt, things like that. That way the bones are protected. And then over time, layers and layers of more sediment cover the organism, creating pressure on top of it. And then again, over time, movement of the layers, the tectonic plates or weathering or erosion bring those fossils to the surface, and then we're able to uncover those fossils by digging. So I'm going to show you a quick brain pop video of how this all works.
You found a fossil? Hey, why are you digging a hole in the backyard? I don't think that's a fossil. I think it belongs to the Rottweiler next door. Dear Tim and Moby, what makes something a fossil? From Ross. Well, a fossil is a remnant of an organism. Usually, fossils are at least several thousand years old and found in the ground. Not every organism gets fossilized after it dies. As a matter of fact, it's a pretty rare occurrence. Fossilization has to start off with the right circumstances, like a quick burial. This is a body fossil, a part of the original organism that's been preserved. It's a bug that got trapped in amber, a type of sticky tree sap. Over time, the sap hardened, and we were left with this little keepsake. Body fossils are usually found in places where bacteria, insects, and the other things that cause decay aren't able to thrive. They form when an animal dies in the desert, or gets frozen in ice, or, gets trapped in a tar pit. Yeah, well, body fossils are really rare. Trace fossils, like these footprints, are the most common fossil type. Trace fossils can include animal tracks, nests, bite marks, and even animal poop. Other types of fossils form when an animal dies and is immediately covered by earth, mud, or sand. The covering slows decay down to a crawl and eventually turns to solid rock. The hardest parts of the animal, stuff like bones, teeth, and shells, don't decay for thousands of years. When they finally do, they've left a lasting impression in the rock. That's a mold fossil, a hollow print. Sometimes, water will bubble up through the earth, filling a mold with minerals. Over time, the minerals harden into rock, leaving a cast fossil. A cast fossil looks just like the original bone or shell. Right, of course, there are also carbon-based fossil fuels. All of the oil, gas, and coal on Earth was formed from the remains of fossilized plants and animals. For example, way back, like 300 million years ago, much of the planet was covered by tropical swamps. When the trees and plants that lived there died, they drifted to the bottom of the swamp. There, they slowly decomposed and formed a soggy, spongy substance called peat. Eventually, the peat got buried under layers of dirt and rock. Heat and pressure took their toll, and after millions of years, the peat turned into coal. Anyway, we can learn a lot from fossils. By looking closely at the fossil record, we can discover when and where lots of different organisms lived. In fact, we can learn about the entire history of life on Earth. Oh, the fossil record is just a fancy term for the sum total of what we know about fossils. Yeah, that's not going to work. It has to be under extreme pressure for millions of... Huh.
Oh, those Tim and Moby. You're supposed to be laughing right now. Alright. So that video was showing you how fossils are made. Here's another website that you can explore if you'd like. We're definitely going to use this website in class tomorrow, so you can explore and see how it works. Just kind of get yourself familiar with it. So Tim and Moby mentioned a couple of different types of fossils. We're going to go over the 5 main types of fossils. That is petrified fossils, molds and casts, carbon films, trace fossils, and preserved remains. Petrified fossils are fossils that had been turned into stone. The word petrified literally means turn into stone. You know, when you say that you're scared, you're petrified, means you're scared stiff. That's kind of what the thinking is there. They form when minerals replace all or part of an organism. So just like when Tim and Moby discussed how bones can get trapped underneath and sediment and all that good stuff, and then water will bubble up and bring in with it minerals. The minerals can harden and then turn into stone, therefore showing you what the bone or what the organism had looked like when it died. Next type of fossils are molds and casts, and again Tim and Moby discussed these. The mold forms when the hard part of the organism is buried in, so that it leaves that imprint in the rock. And then again, when minerals will replace the organism and harden, it forms a cast. So the cast forms as a result of the mold. Keep that in mind. Try to differentiate between those two. Next, we've got carbon film fossils. Carbon film fossils are living things that contain an element called carbon. Well, all living things contain an element called carbon. And when these living organisms decay, it'll leave behind the carbon. And it leaves basically an imprint or a stamp of carbon left. And it usually... it can show very delicate parts and very intricate parts of the organism, especially with plants. Next type of fossil, also discussed with Tim and Moby, were the trace fossils. Trace fossils show the activity of an organism, so it's not going to show the organism itself, but it can be a footprint or poop or nests or things like that, such as what Tim and Moby told us. And same thing happens, but there's no actual organism involved here, or no parts of the organism, just what they leave behind. So, for example, the footprint after an organism puts its foot into loose soil, the footprint can be buried by layers of sediment and then again becomes hardened like solid rock, and then it is left there. The last and I think the coolest type of fossils are the preserved remains. And those preserved remains are organisms that get preserved almost exactly the way they died. So there are three types of preserved remains. You've got the amber. So an insect or an organism gets trapped in the tree sap and it's preserved like it is. And amber used to be, I don't know if it kind of still is, but you can ask your mom. She may have some amber jewelry. I know that was all the rage about 15 years ago or so, but amber jewelry. So the organism gets trapped in the sap. Another is where organisms get trapped in tar. And the most famous tar pits that we know of are the La Brea tar pits in California. Um, Organisms got trapped there, and the tar prevented a lot of the decay there. And lastly, when organisms get stuck in ice. And there was, which movie was that? I think it was one of the Ice Ages where they showed a sloth stuck in the ice. But even more realistically, there have been mammoths uncovered where bodies were almost completely preserved because they had been frozen in ice. So I think those are super cool. So that kind of takes us back. Let me go back over the 5 types of um, fossils. If I can go quickly. No, I cannot. Slowly. Alright, we've got petrified fossils, molds and casts, carbon films, trace fossils, and preserved remains. And there's all the info for those. That takes us back to index fossils. Keeping in mind that index fossils were those commonly found fossils that were around the world and were only alive during certain periods of time, kind of like that trilobite, which is one of the more well-known index fossils that will help you to get a relative date of the rock that it was buried in. So that pretty much ends the PowerPoint for fossils. We are going to continue our work with fossils tomorrow in the next couple of days and even talk a little bit more about that fossil record and why it means so much to the scientific world. If you would like to explore a little bit more, here are some websites that you can play around with or explore and see more about and learn more about fossils. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. See you tomorrow.